Sounds good.
Okay. All right. So we're in our fifth session for the day. And we have an awesome facilitator in the person of Dr. Michelle Bettin. She was briefly at the University of the Bahamas. In her capacity, she works as a clinical psychologist. And it was at the University of the Bahamas that she was able to offer one of the very first safe zone trainings. And it was definitely something that we need and we need to continue. However, she's now at the University of Minnesota, um, in I guess in a similar capacity. And I thought that it was fitting that we have her for this part of the discussion, and because we want to give those persons watching language, we want to give, because sometimes LGBTQ people, even though we're LGBTQ, we don't have the verbiage to explain all of the things and all of the emotions that may be going on. And so safe zone training, I think, is a great way for both allies and LGBTQ people to come versed within the verbiage and language, and just to know how to address one another. Because what we don't want to be doing is triggering one another by using language that is derogatory, and that doesn't uplift and inspire and bring us together. And so, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bettine. She'll give some more information about herself, and then we can engage her as much as possible as we come in. All right? So go ahead, Dr. Bettine.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I am Michelle Bettin, and I am both a clinical social worker and a clinical psychologist. And I am happy to be here with you. So I am a US citizen. I was in the Bahamas for about 2.5 years. I missed my time there, had a great time, but have some family illness and that brought me back here. One of the things that was hard to experience in the Bahamas was the lack of compassion, understanding, and protections for folks of all different identities, including various sexual and gender identities. So safe zone training is something I was introduced to years ago, and lots of colleges in the US train all of their staff, or many of their staff, on these kind of, some of it's about language, some of it is just sensitivity and ways of understanding. So I'm happy to share this. And I do want to say this, though, that as I'm back in the States and realizing some of the language in the safe zone training is already kind of out of date. So there are new language, and I want to encourage people. So this is a great place to start to get some language and ways of thinking about things. And then I think the most important takeaway, or one of the takeaway points, is that for all of us to self-identify and to allow other people to self-identify. So in the end, people get to decide what words fit. So just because there's words in this training, some of them won't make sense, some of them might not land right. And that's, I think, part of the point of this training, is to allow people to decide what terms, what words, and who they want to share those with. So those are some of the overarching points. Just trying to see here. I think I'm going to go ahead and share my screen at this point. So we're going to do briefly. So I know there's a small group here, and then there's, so I'm on the wrong tab there. Sorry about that. Can everyone see this? The group norms? Can you just shake your head if you can see that? Okay, great. I'm going to still say these, right? These norms. There won't be as much dialogue necessarily because it's being recorded and it's a little smaller group here, but I know we're streaming as well. These groups are designed for in-person, right? The whole world is different in this COVID time. So this is really about, in this training, it's usually done in groups of people, and generally a kind of small to medium group where there's discussion and there's breakout sessions and things like that. We don't have time to do that, but some of the important things, and I think just coming to this topic, to discussions around here, it is important to make sure that we're asking questions. So we will open up, whether it's through the chat or the folks in the actual Zoom meeting, please ask questions, right? You don't want to necessarily like interrupt someone, but if you don't know, it's okay to ask. And especially when you're coming from a place of curiosity rather than hatred or anger, so if you're asking a question to be mean, that's not what we're saying. But if you really want to know and have a different understanding, ask questions. The Vegas rule, so again, I don't know how much dialogue will be in this space. Have you guys heard about this, the Vegas rule? this is about, so there's the term, if you go to Vegas, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? So in Vegas, people do, they gamble and drink and whatever. It's kind of a party town. So we're not doing that here in this Zoom, but the point is, when we have these dialogues, we want to keep people's privacy in mind so that if something is shared here, you can share what you've learned, but not about, if someone said it, or share their names, or to out people if they happen to do that in spaces like this. And again, whether it's now, oops, sorry about that, I'm cutting off that LOL. If we can have some like kindness, compassion, and humor around this, laugh again, out of kindness, not out of meanness, but it's okay to like relax a little about this, right? We're all learning together, things change. It's okay to have a good time with that. When you're in these conversations, share the airtime, meaning, if you're the person who jumps in all the time, let some other people jump in. If you're the type of person who kind of leans back, maybe try to lean in a little bit and jump in with a question or comment. And I think this is a huge, and I've seen this with a lot of people through Safe Zone, especially people who were not part of the LGBTQIA plus community. They would find information, and even in the Bahamas when we did trainings, sometimes people would say this at the end to say, I changed my mind. And it might just be about this part or that part, but they've learned something that actually changed them. So let's all reserve our right to change our mind about kind of where we stand, what we feel. Maybe we change our relationship with a certain term or our word today. So that's all we're going to talk about with that. So I'm going to open this up. Natino, can folks also chat in through Facebook? I don't know the limits of the technology.
Yes, they can.
Okay, so you're gonna be watching that way. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna go to the next section. So normally we would have you with packets where you'd kind of be filling this out on paper and pencil, but I'm just gonna put this on the screen. I might have to make it a little bit smaller here. Sorry. You know what? I am actually, I might put it in the chat for you guys because this is probably is this hard to read on your screen? It's pretty small. There's 5 questions. So actually, I'll do this. I'm going to drop these questions in the chat. And then I want people to just reflect on these for a few minutes. And then we're going to have a little discussion about that. Here we go. I don't know if you also want to drop this in the Facebook chat as well. It's up to you guys. Let me find it if I can find the chat here. There it is. Okay, it's not letting me chat while I'm screen sharing, so I'm going to pop out for a second. So just take a few minutes. Okay, sorry. Oh, there they are. There we go. I'll go back to sharing my screen.
So we're reflecting on these questions.
Just reflecting for a moment, and then if it's about been a couple of minutes, anyone who wants to share any reactions, any thoughts, any questions about these questions, something that came to mind. And it looks like I can't see the chat while I'm screen sharing, so if anything comes up, if someone could let me know if anything comes up in the chat.
Okay, sure, no problem. I'm going to lean in and just share a little bit of my experience in the Bahamas. So what I heard from people in conversations about diversity and inclusion, particularly around LGBTQIA folks. I heard from a lot of people that the church, so I'm thinking a little bit about number 4.
even number 2, but that for a lot of folks that I talk to, the church had such a strong influence on their beliefs about how right, how wrong, what it meant. And I see that in the States, if there's students that grow up in very religious families, very strictly religious families, they may have that same, but it's not as pervasive because there's many states where there's legal marriage, equal marriage, things like that. But I think that's powerful, and I think very powerful for people who both have strong faith and identify as part of the community. That's something that folks have to wrestle with, that they have to work through. And I think spaces like being involved in groups, in therapy, and finding spaces to work through that, because that can be, because with that often comes, in my opinion, I'm just speaking from my experience, of shame and guilt around that, and working through that and being able to kind of embrace who you are. And it's almost like peeling away layers, right, that you've internalized. Because we live in a world, even though many parts of the world, there's some liberal folks and liberal pockets, all of us have grown up in a racist, sexist, homophobic, heteronormative, like there's the layers and layers, right? So we need to work through it. It's not easy. It's, I think, a lifelong process. And of course, the more layers that you have of marginalized identity, the more layers to work through. The less layers, it's just unfortunate in that way. But any thoughts coming through the chat? Otherwise, we can just leave these. These are things to ponder for later.
There's nothing coming through on the Facebook chat yet.
Okay. We can keep moving, and we could spend a whole hour just like reflecting and pondering and discussing these questions. Excuse me. I think this down here, number 5. It's my hope over time in the Bahamas and communities where there isn't as much acceptance, is that when people develop relationships with people that are part of the community and acknowledge their family members and really get to know them and understand them. So knowing people as full people, right? So your identity as any one of those letters, that's one part of your identity. If people really know you as a full person and that's just one part of it, you get to understand the richness rather than these like I think of them as like flat stereotypes, right? That all gay people are all lesbians. There's these, it's what oppression is, right?
They're one-dimensional.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're one-dimensional.
Exactly. Thank you. That's exactly what I was trying to lean into. So we'll leave it with that. I think we're going to move to the vocabulary sheet. Natino, did anyone get the email where I sent, there's a comprehensive vocabulary list as well as the training packet?
So what I did, I noticed you sent that to me. I would have to send that out. I didn't get a chance to do that because I was doing
That's
something.
great. So either, I don't know if you can like link that to the Facebook page or like send it out later. So there's a whole long list and we're not going to go through all this. And sorry, I should be in a different, I hate to scroll through like this, but I'm going to get down to the comprehensive list. There's some core terms, but I also sent out this comprehensive list. So we don't have time to go through every single word because I think there's like 10 or 13 different pages on here. But I think, so again, this was written a bit ago, I think at least a decade ago. A lot of it though, so I was looking through it today. So a lot of these terms still are used by some people. Some terms have evolved. I'm going to just kind of skim through this and I'm going to go to, there's a do and don't part. So Natino, and Ide, are there any particular words we should point attention to before we get to the do's and don'ts that you're aware of?
Someone actually asked a question on Facebook.
Oh, great. Great.
They were saying, I think it's Jared Williams. He says, I think the explanation of what LGBTQ is limited to academia and access to that information is limited to even the community itself. How do we create more access for that?
It's a really good question. And I think, I feel like there's so much information out there. I don't know that there's as much in the Bahamas specifically. I know, and hopefully you folks can talk about what are some of the like movements and activities and groups that are places people can lean into locally. In this world right now, we're mostly remote anyways, but if you can tap into, and we can I can send some links of websites within the US that have a lot of both just kind of educational resources. This packet, excuse me, that we're sending out, there's a lot of information in here that would be great to kind of like lean into this, look at it, ask questions, have a conversation, and there are all kinds of groups. But does anyone who's present either in chat or in the Zoom call want to jump in on what some other areas people can connect with?
I think maybe the intersection, because some people use like terms, they'll use like non-binary and another term, or they to show that there's an intersection, or to cover that intersectionality of where they may lie in between. And I think that sometimes, and I think this is to Jared's point, that sometimes even the labels that we identify with can sometimes be a little bit not one-dimensional. They may cover certain aspects but neglect other aspects of who our personality and who we identify as are, if that makes sense.
Yes, that totally makes sense. And I'm going to see if they have intersectionality in here. I don't think so. I feel like that's a newer term, but to me, that's speaking to, some people call it social location or social identities. So there's all different aspects of our identity. And there's all different models. If I wish I actually was doing another presentation but I don't have it pulled up. But it may, sometimes there's like circles all around the self, and then out of self, there's things like race or ethnic identity. There might be gender or gender identity. There might be nation of origin, so are you an immigrant or not? It would include, could be socioeconomic status. It can include ableism, so how many abilities or disabilities are you struggling with? I know I'm missing some right now. Anyone jump in? What else am I missing as different like social identities? Those are some of the main characters, but I feel like they can go ahead. Yeah.
Jared says the generation gaps, I guess the different generation gaps. So the different generations that you're in sometimes can come with these social identities that are prevalent amongst different generations.
Yes.
And so there's a formation that's what he's speaking to. Yeah.
Yeah, you're so right. So so I'm thinking of Pamela Hayes for psychologists came up with what's called the addressing model. So that would be the first one, which is age. But age doesn't mean just so your age is one part. And it is different to be an 18-year-old male and a 50-year-old male. There's differences about that alone. But it's also that generation. So what did you grow up with? What is that? And I see this in the workplace. I work in a workplace where we have a whole range, everything from baby boomers to millennials to even some income. Our trainees are Gen Z, right? So there's lots of cross-generational. So I think that's really important. And I think I want to say this about this whole training, but about intersectionality. Identity shifts, right? It can change. So someone may identify as bisexual today, and as they get to know themselves and they evolve, they may change later to say, actually, I'm pansexual. It's even broader than that. And that's okay. And with life, like the salient aspects of your social identity evolves. So I think about, again, I came back to the US not long after George Floyd was murdered here in Minnesota. And the salience of race for some, even people who it wasn't as salient before. But again, so events like that can totally bring to the forefront a part of your identity where it feels like at this point in my life, my race or my gender or my sexual orientation feels like the most pressing. I think, was someone going to ask a question?
Yes.
Please jump in.
I want to comment back to what you were saying about sexuality changing. And I think for our community, I think it's something that I'm trying to understand. Like some of them say, I'm a true gay. I will never go with a woman. I will never, or a lesbian woman. I will never go with a man. But yet in our own community, we criticize and we demonize bisexual people, knowing that they are part of the spectrum. And for us, it is critical to understand that we can't do that in society, in our own communities. So when out of the heteronormative society in our own communities, we start putting labels to our own selves or crossing and demonizing our own communities for the things that they do. And I think in our country, we've left out bisexuality and the visibility of bisexual people. in our
Right.
country, in our context. So I like the fact that you mentioned that, and that on this, when people replay this or they go back to this, it will click like, hey, it's on a spectrum.
Yes, yes, yes. And
Oh,
go ahead, Natina.
no, I was gonna say, I had Jared's comment. He said that newer identities are harder to pin down in words, I guess, and then I guess the time frame that they're accepted. And I sent him the link since he is commenting so much, so that he could just join us and say, "Well,
Okay.
so."
Great. That's great. Great,
Okay.
great. Great, but I want to jump back to Alexa's comments that um, in the United States, when I was growing up, bisexuality was also, it was in that era of, it was like demonized, in that what it meant to be bisexual was you were confused or you liked everyone. You couldn't be monogamous if you were bisexual because you wanted everyone. So it just meant you're kind of crazy, like it didn't have, so a lot of people of my generation didn't grasp onto that term because it was like, no, I'm monogamous. I like, so there's a lot of confusion. And we see this over and over all over the world where the people with marginalized identities fight against each other and put each other down. And it's like, if we can become a community that raises, all of us up, because what happens, and all of us are fighting down at the bottom, and there's the people up there doing their nonsense, right? with the power in the world. So I hope that we can try to lean into compassion and understanding. And this is the other thing, it's like my personal philosophy is like, if we can each do us, like if I make sure I'm doing right and living right, I don't have to police or monitor anyone else in the world, right? They can do that. They get to decide who they are, and I can lean into it and respect that. So I feel like I'm going to soapbox a little bit, so I'm going to step down. And I'm just kind of scrolling to show all these, and I want to get down to some of this part right here. Can you guys see this okay? Let me make it just a teeny bit bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's. Could we go to the Z and the Zer? I think that's.
Yeah.
And Jared could actually help us with that too and jump in. Feel free to jump in, Jared. He's in the chat now because he's
Great,
actually in
great, great.
Canada as well.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
We're international here. So as you see, like even I'm going to go to my name. If you see my name, the Michelle Bettin, she, her. So it is general practice on a university campus that almost everyone has on their email signature or enters meetings where it is just a given that we identify our pronouns. And so this zer, there's different ways. There's many other terms I've heard, but this is a way to kind of say, either to defy that binary system, right, of she and he. So some people go with the they, their, them, they, them, theirs. Sorry, I'm mixing those up. Or Z0 is saying, I don't identify with either she or he. So that I want a different pronoun. And this came out, I think, does anyone know who, I want to say it's Leslie Goldberg. Someone came up with this term, but I'm sure many people did. Came up with different versions of these, kind of reclaiming and resisting. To me, this is a statement against binary genders. So anyone else want to jump in on that? Yeah, feel free.
I definitely feel like the renaming of these terminologies is definitely a way to resist. And I think that to Jared's point, as he was making earlier, as we create new identities, and this is I think where people I guess they sort of don't like the whole how the letters keep forming, right? But the truth of the matter is that, like you just said, as we evolve, as we change, our identities change and they morph into products of the space and time that we're in. And I think that that's just what it is. We have to be willing. I think if we start to think in that way, instead of thinking linear and this one straight, I'm just straight or gay or whatever you want to label yourself as, then you begin to understand the full range of our humanity. And
That's right.
then and we'd be more open to people as they go through different stages and transition into these different aspects of their personalities and identities. Go ahead.
No, I had one little point, a small point. It baffles me too sometimes when you see LGBTQ people uh, have conservative ideas around fixed identities and they can't move outside of thinking outside of their own binaries themselves. So you're also perpetuating that kind of oppression and trying to close this gap. But if you know anything about queer phenomenology, like there's so many existing possibilities of what you can be in that space. And so when you queering by itself is oppositional. Querying by itself means I'm moving outside of that boundary. Querying itself is a strategy that not only gives you resistance, but it gives you agency to be resistant. So it just, like I said, it just baffles me when I don't know, you present yourself in a way that gay community, they themselves don't understand. I'm like, what is that? No, this is who I am. I am they. And I'm like, no, you can't own that. And we're like, if you can't own that, then you can't own your own identity as well. So don't box me in because you've boxed yourself, and
Right.
that for me is always a problem.
Right,
As
right,
it relates
right.
to, as it relates to trans terminology, I think in our culture, we do a disservice within our own community to trans communities, especially here in the Bahamas. Words like he, she, it, oh, that, you know. For example, the word hermaphrodite, as it
Yeah.
relates to intersex people, is very derogatory. You would find media would actually use these types of language, which is actually violent to intersex communities, trans and intersex communities, calling them hermaphrodites or chicks with dicks and all those types of stuff. So I think this is very important. And beyond this pride, beyond this training, we're going to take this into our public spaces and start to do training for media and start to do training for social services and education so people can
Amen.
know how to start addressing citizens, trans citizens, and intersex citizens of the Bahamas. For example,
Right.
tranny, it's very disgusting to have that word used to you, you know.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
some people say, "Oh, I'm uncomfortable calling her she," or "I'm comfortable." Well, if you're uncomfortable, but just call them by their name. How would
Thank
you
you.
like to be
Thank
called?
you.
If you don't want to say she, how would
Yes,
you like
yes,
to be
yes.
addressed? I can remember an incident. I was going to BEC, and I knew it was on purpose. They send me the email because after you turn off your light and put on a new light, they send you the refund. So obviously you see the name Alexis DeMarco and you see a female pronoun to the name, but yet you're going to still put the Mr. in front for me to like rile up and dress. So when I went to pick up the check, she was like, "Oh, you didn't even correct me about this Mr." I said, "No, it's fine. You said Alexis," but because I knew where it was coming from. You have to be very cognizant, as especially as a trans citizen, in navigating in the Bahamas. And I'm saying trans citizen because I'm using my lived experience here. You have to be very cognizant of how people will try to demonize you on the slick or will try to come for you on the slick, and you have to call them out as you see fit. So I'm very glad that we're having this training in regards to how do we address our citizens. For example, born female, born male. Perfect example. No, it's assigned. Trans people are assigned. You are assigned a gender. The doctor sees what he sees, but he doesn't test your chromosomes at birth. He doesn't know what's going on with your organs internally. So they only could see what they assign you at birth, not what you're born, because you could never change what you were born.
Right, 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 right. Yes, you've done half of the list already. You
Go.
so go ahead, Natino.
No, I think Jared had something to
I
say.
have one more point, Ms. Ben,
Yeah,
and
please.
so I'm going to shout out. But I saw something that reminded me this whole idea of misrecognition. I think it's always about, at
Sorry.
least for um, marginalized bodies and trans bodies and queer bodies, it's all about the body and how you present yourself through the world and how you come through the world in the body. And so you judge the body by the function, and you say, okay, then you're a male, so it means you should be penetrating, and so vice versa. And so we create ideas and stereotypes based on that presentation of that body. And so you see the name and then you see a body and it doesn't match. And all of a sudden you are confused.
Yeah, some people are confused, but
And you're
because it's
confused.
their interpretation of that body,
Yeah.
right? So it's not even the body, it's their interpretation.
Then you have to step in and say, no, how I present myself, how should I say this? My sexuality is not based on my body or how you perceive me to be, or my gender is not exactly who this body represent, because I can have a whole gender identity that's not even matching my body, and vice
Right,
versa,
right.
right? Yeah, so I don't know. It
Yes,
makes sense.
yes. It totally makes sense. And we're going to get to something called the genderbread person. And you can jump in too, Natina, but it will really break down. And I feel like in Bahamas and in many places, right, there's a man box and a woman box. And like there's things that are supposed to line up. And this when we get to that part, it will exactly talk about that it's not that simplistic. And I think people struggle and feel threatened, right? Because I have to say this. So one of my specialty is neuropsychology. So I think I know a lot about the brain. Our brains are meaning-making, pattern-seeking machines. So there's a part of this that is biological, right? But it came from a time where as a hunter-gatherer, we had to know, tiger, scary, bad, right? Where we would come up with these really quick kind of summaries of the situation for our safety. And we haven't evolved in some ways where we still do this to people, where we see something, we interpret it, and then we put it into that box. And it takes practice and commitment to open our minds and to actually have our minds be open and to realize those boxes are, and now we're socialized into those, right? Because it isn't really life and death all the time. It is in some places, right? Around race and around gender and things like that. But it has a different meaning, and we can work against that. And this training, and I hope you do continue to pass along some of this language. And when we get to some of these concepts about it's not this simple, and it takes some work to open your mind, free your mind, they say, right? So we went through a bunch of this. I just want to make sure that we didn't miss any really important ones. This was stunning to me. So the word homosexual in the US has been taboo for so long that I remember as a child hearing it and was like like we knew it was a bad word, but it's something I hear very common, right? So in the US, so again, this training is developed in the US. So as Bahamian folks, you need to take this and make it yours, right? And you can kind of say, this is based on that. We can keep or reject whatever parts of this, right? Because this isn't the answer. It's just someone's interpretation. So again, homosexual. So for me as a psychologist, that word is a little bit triggering because of the history of diagnosis and stigmatization, right? So it used to be used as a term to say someone was mentally ill. So I have very strong reactions, but people get to decide, again, their own terms. So just like queer used to be a terrible term. That is a reclaimed term that is about power and rejecting that. So it's not for me to say what people embrace. But in general, so if you're not part of the community, don't use the word homosexual. Use the word gay, use lesbian, gay. We'll get to some other identities and sexualities. So here's just examples. And I think sometimes people don't have the language if they haven't had these conversations. So this is actually something to give to them to say, don't say this, say this. Say we want to do a better job of being inclusive of our gay employees. Easy, right? When you practice, no problem. So we already talked a bit about this, and I bet a lot of this audience knows, but this female-bodied or male-bodied versus assigned female at birth. So again, that bodied language is about a medical interpretation of that body at birth. And I love that Alexis brought this up. There are so many genetic variations, and some of those manifest physically. So there isn't just XX and XY. There are in nature, right? And if we want to go to that religious side, right? So are we saying God made mistakes when there's all these different genetic variations? So I'm not going to go there with that, but just saying in nature, there's a whole variety, and some of it is visible and some of it's not to the human eye. And again, here's some language we can use. This group is open to both transgender and cisgender people. So that is language. So I'm happy to say in Minnesota, there's a very active LGBTQ community and also trans community. And many folks are using this language. So I may be in a meeting where I identify myself as a white, able-bodied, cisgender woman, da, 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 da. Like that's part of the language of just acknowledging it. We all have a relationship to gender, right? It's not that gender is the other, but that there is another stance, which is you can be cisgender, and that means something different. And we'll get into, but there's even more variations than that. this is something that I think this whole training is about, going against this polarization, or thinking that there's like there's either a box of man and woman or a spectrum of men and women. So when you put opposite sexes or both genders, that really gets down to there's two choices, and that leaves out many, many folks. So we want to talk about all genders, and use language like this. Video games aren't just a boy thing. Kids of all genders play them. I'm just checking on time. I know we have a lot of activities. Let me see here. So this is something I noticed too, moving away from this gendered language, from ladies and gentlemen, or even we hear this a lot, the mailman, fireman, policeman, rather than police officer, firefighter, everyone, folks. There are ways that are much more inclusive that we can use. And then this, I know some people have a struggle with the they, but again, it's almost, I feel like there's a safety in these boxes for some people of male and female. And if you fit neatly into one of those boxes, that can be comfortable, so that it can be difficult to then say, well, someone doesn't fit in those boxes. But again, I would say, if we were about defining and identifying ourselves and let everyone else do that, our world would be a much healthier and happier place. So if people choose, so I work at the University of Minnesota. In our intake forms, we ask for pronouns, we ask for preferred name. So there are ways to just right away open up and let people know that you get to show up however you are. And I want to know how you identify, because that's what's important. So, and when in doubt, I'm not sure how they identify. And I think it was Alexis, but someone said, you can always use their name, right? You can always use a name. Can't go wrong with that. So any comments or questions here? See someone else coming in. Okay, sorry. I should have been in another packet where I'm not scrolling so much. I'm going to move this over so I can make it a little bit smaller. All right. Was that a hand or just, I saw someone moving? Okay. So let me get to the top. So one thing, I just want to name this. So the language evolves. And when I was in college, actually the language was, we started out with GLBT, right? So it was gay, lesbian, bi. So that was the term, it was GLB. And then it became GLBT. And then thanks to our women standing up and saying, wait a minute, why are men always first? Then we went to LGBTQ. But you'll still hear me, because I spent a few decades saying GLBT. I'll stumble over because I'm used to saying that first, but it changes. So the point is, it evolves. It's an acronym. I like this umbrella because what it captures for us is that so queer is the umbrella, right? There's all kinds of queer folks, but that's a whole bunch of folks, right? It's a diverse group of people. There's this one side of the umbrella that there's, it's interesting because it's even evolved in the US that they don't use the term sexual orientation as much as sexuality. So like this umbrella says, there's sexuality. So there's lesbian people, there's gay people, there's bisexual people. And then those are, again, sexual identities or sexualities. On the other side would be about gender or gender identity. And that little lonely T, transgender, doesn't capture it all. There's transgender, there's gender fluid, gender nonconforming, there's non-binary, there's lots of ways people identify and can identify how they identify as far as their gender. I'm trying to think if there's any other notes here that are important. I don't know if you can read all of this. Oh yeah, just saying, so even down here, it's saying that Q sometimes stands for questioning, it can stand for queer. So again, I think if you have interest, if you're part of this community, allow yourself and allow others to have this freedom and fluidity. And if you're trying to learn about this community, understand it's evolving. So it's not about getting it right, but it's about saying, I'm trying to understand and I can appreciate everyone within this community as part of the greater, right? We're all in this together, this world. So it's about offering people the same respect and capacity to be who they are. Any questions, comments on this one?
Yeah, I like the diagram, how it shows LGB as sexualities and then the T as genders. And I think it is important that we understand this in our Caribbean context, because in the Caribbean context, they just put all in one bracket. That's it. But as far as trans citizens are concerned, there's a certain plight that they have to fight, and the reason why, as it relates to their gender. For example, the battle for them, gender identity recognition, which is important. Their identities and their trans people are stateless in the Caribbean because their gender identity does not match their documents. So we're walking around here stateless, which is an issue that governments must address, but they do not understand it. That's why it's important for us to have these types of trainings and sessions. But again, it takes the visibility of the trans community, which is happening in the Bahamas and also in the Caribbean. But being stateless as a citizen of a country is an important issue. And that's why when you pointed out this umbrella, it pointed out to me that there are different issues as it relates to trans and intersex communities that must be ahead, such as gender identity recognition laws for this community.
When what you're talking about to me are like basic human rights, right? The right to be known, the right to
Right. No
be a
special
citizen, no special rights.
No
it's just
special
about
rights.
basic.
Yeah.
I think Jared was going to say something, and then I have something to say.
Okay, Jared.
I feel like it's like I'm saying too much, but like you can't have, and I'm just speaking from a I don't know, a very passionate space, but like the trans community have always been, it's particularly in the Bahamas. I mean elsewhere as well, right? But trans community has been so vocal historically, advocating, and Alexa's been doing the work, doing the work, you know. And I said to say you won't have gay rights unless you have trans right, and you know, but at the same time, uh, I think in the Caribbean context in the Bahamas, I think all of the queer community don't have that stateless feeling. Even if they have some type of, even if they still have that type of privilege in the sense that you take part in the, you know, okay, you can vote, or you can get insurance or whatever. But like real participation in society and a whole, all of the queer community don't feel inclusive. They all feel stateless and vagrant and whatever. Like they're just not really taking part in the community, in society in a whole. Like you can't walk and hold your partner hand in hand. You can't kiss your partner. You can't show any kind of public display of
Right.
affection. Or you get, you know, you there's a threat to violence, and also there is no protection laws for the community itself. None. You know, so if my partner is in the hospital, I mean, you can't see them, but like, but they, oh, so if my partner's in the hospital and they say, well, are you a family? And you was like, well, no, it's my partner. Well, only family. So I can't, he is sick right now. I cannot see him because there's laws in place that prevent me to even be visible in that way, to be there in a time of need. So, you know, there's, I don't know. I'm very like this Pride Bahamas is doing such a great job and really pushing hard for visibility. But you know me, Tino, I always feel like visibility also comes with a price, and what that price is, I don't know if we have really counted that cost in all of its totality. I'm pretty sure we won't even know. But yeah, in terms of rights and visibility, there I feel like we're all left out of that. But at the same time, if we don't give, if it's trans rights, it will lead the rights for all of us in that sense. Okay, that's me, Tino. That's my time.
Okay. But so amazing. Even while Alexis was talking, and I do agree. One of the main reasons why I think I connected with Alexis in particular about this is because I had been doing this work, like trying to get people to understand what it meant to be in these spaces and having to have to deal with that feeling of being stateless, right? Um, and I think the important thing is because you talk about, Alexis talked about, governments won't recognize. Um, in the Bahamas, in particular, it says it's a particular kind of indictment when a private organization has more laws which recognize the sexual orientation of citizens than the government itself. And in this case, that would be the University of the Bahamas has laws in place to recognize sexual orientation when the country that I exist in doesn't even do that. And that says, it speaks volumes to about who was drafting that piece of legislation. It speaks volumes to the kind of ideas that are lurking within legislations past, present, and future. Like it's all of these things that we're talking about. And so I definitely agree with Jared when he says that when it comes to trans, because not only that, if you look at the statistics, right? Trans women, trans women of color are dying, are being killed because of their visibility. And that in and of
Yes.
itself, is one of the reasons why they need protections. And we need to stand together in solidarity, stand up against these oppressive measures, because no one should have to die because they're going out and putting on clothing that they feel comfortable in and wearing stuff that they just feel authentically themselves in. That's not a reason to die. It's not a reason to be persecuted or killed for. That's absolutely nonsense. And so, talking about how spaces like the Bahamas need to acknowledge its citizens, right? Not in the ways that they've prescribed only, but the ways that we see ourselves. And I think to Jared's point, is that you have within the LGBTQ community, you have people because they can't, they're not aware, they're not sensitive, and this is why this training is important again, because they're not sensitive to what's actually happening to them. They may feel it, but they don't understand or they don't have the verbiage to explain that feeling, because intuitively sometimes we're guided and we figure out some things, right? But it's nothing like when you're given a word that kind of hits home and says, this is who I am, or this is what I feel. And I think that the more and more we do things like this, and this is why the training is definitely important, the more and more we have these training, we give people language and we equip them with tools to navigate the society. And that's what Pride is supposed to be about. So,
Yes, 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 I agree. And I do think there's kudos to the University of the Bahamas, right? So a university is supposed to be the thought leader of a country. It does forge ahead at times. And let's hope that it's forging a path and the country will fall behind that. And again, coming from a country, I've seen my country go through this, going through where there weren't any protections, to having equal marriage, to both sexual orientation and gender identity now being protected, right? And knock on wood, as with the potential changes in the election. So I'm gonna just hope, but I know it can happen. I know that within time, with people fighting, right, that we can make these changes where people can evolve. And it's hard, and it feels like it's never gonna happen. Go ahead, jump in.
Yeah, I just think too, like in terms of liberation and liberatory frameworks, yes, UB should be any university by itself, by its own distinction, should be a place where experimentation and play in a sense
Yeah,
to disrupt the norm, and
disruption.
that's what queer do. We disrupt the status quo. But my thing is, look at the numbers here today, and look at the numbers when you ask the queer community, the LGBTQ community, if we were to do a $20 all you can drink, there would be a massive, massive crowd. But when it comes down to the real work, who are here in the room? Who are here in the room? Not just our intellectual community, and it's always been like, in a sense, the intellectual community have to now shoulder the responsibility and try to rally up the people. But I feel like they need to also feel the need and the necessary to be exist. And if they don't feel like they have value for themselves, then we can't give that to you. You have to own that yourself. And so I think that also means there's a faction and division within the group, because we are on, like, we understand the extremity of what is happening. We understand, we see, we come across with our literature, we see it on our like Facebook page, but like for the majority of them, if it's not having to do anything to do with and fun and entertainment and enjoyment, then they want to be a part of it. But the actual work of the struggle has always been
Yeah.
on the trans body as well.
To
Yes.
add to what you're saying, we have to acknowledge the trauma that our community has suffered over the years. In 1999, like experiencing trauma in your own space of a gay club where you are free to sneak out your mom's house, sneak out your family house just to be around people that you can understand. And you have police that target you in those spaces, in your own spaces. So visibility for a lot of our community members is very difficult and it's very hard, especially when you have experienced trauma within your own community space. For example, when parents throw their children out because they are LGBTI, we don't have spaces to put them. So they resort to the street, they resort to the beach, they get into sex work, and they're taken advantage of. And then that's when you have another set of social ills that come upon them. So there's a lot of trauma that our community have experienced from supposed to be mother, father love, but because of that, it's very difficult if we don't have programs in place to place these persons. For example, having pride and this visibility of pride can cause an uproar within a home that didn't know their child was LGBTI, their loved one was LGBTI. But today I can say we have provided a space. If someone is suffering or going to be impacted because of the visibility of pride, we have a place to put them. We have somewhere to put them. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, it was
Mm-hmm.
imperative that we put resources in place after and during this event that may raise the alarm to the visibility. And you talk about the price. The price is if I become visible, who's going to pay my school fee? If I become visible and my father finds out who was the bishop of the highest church, what am I going to do? So as a community, we have to put in place things for our community, resources so they can be able to fall back on if something were to happen. And that's what was lacking in our country for a very, very long time. They've experienced a lot of trauma. There's still a lot of scaredness. Yes, if it's a party, they're going to come because that's late night, everybody's sleeping. They get just like they going out with their friends. But that strong visibility, like you see here, we've even had people who registered under fake names because of the fear
For
or the
safety, right?
backlash,
Yeah.
or because of the things that they experience. And like you say, it comes with an individual choice and an individual price, especially for my trans community. For them, it comes with a price. Like you have to be able to know, okay, if I do this, what's next for me? How am I going to eat? Whose roof am I going to sleep under? So these are some of the things that we have to look at in our Bahamian context of visibility as LGBTI folks. I had somebody tell me he could never be a permanent secretary if he becomes visible. And I'm like, what? But these are things these are some
Real.
of their lived realities. And I cannot blame them. I cannot discredit those realities. But what we can do is we can help them and work through some of those realities and how to break some of their own internal stigma and discrimination that they place or that they're put in internally amongst themselves.
Yes.
I like your idea of trauma as well, and you put a time frame that was very like vivid for me, growing up in the '90s, and I had a cousin. His name was Sean, and he was just talking about that visibility. Sean was a police officer, but Sean was also a very good dancer. He had these high heels, and he had these he was so lively and colorful and beautiful. But he couldn't be that like in the public eye. He would dress up in home, but and he left in the '90s. I mean, he left for New York and contracted HIV, and then came home and died. That's just like how the story. But then talking about that trauma, we have a record of loss that is still tallying. We have a record of
Yes.
loss that sometimes I know you did some work at the fort and you lit the candles up, and we recognize those people and can recognize those individuals. And so where do we do with that trauma? Where do we take that pain? And there aren't enough spaces. We talk about, like, when we get into our conversations, we talk about all the, oh, remember we used to do this, but we don't talk about that pain. How did you feel in that moment? What did you do? And so, and just like the nation is still groaning over colonialism, it's still groaning to be born in that way. There's this colonialism and this trauma and this pain are growing alongside each other. So there's a doubling of pain. And
Layers.
How do you unpack that? And so it takes meaningful conversations and also being vulnerable. And so being visible means to be vulnerable. Are we willing to be vulnerable enough to say, this hurts me? I remember Sean, and I didn't know how to handle that. I did not know how to handle that. It took me almost 30, 20 years to just deal with that. So talking about trauma and talking about safe spaces, these things coalesce. These we need to have them, and we don't have them.
Yes, 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 yes. I hear both of you, and the layers and layers of trauma, right? And we know that about trauma, it piles up. You got to deal with it. It's the only way, like, to heal from trauma is to go through it, right? You have to go through it and process it. Anyways, I'm getting to my psychology soapbox. So we're going to go to, I thank you for sharing these stories. I mean, there's a lot of pain. I know in having this presentation, I've been thinking a lot about what will this mean for folks as far as safety? Who is going to show up? Who's going to take that chance to be here today? And I see there's many of you that are, and I'm so happy that you're providing this in ways that people who don't feel they're safe enough yet to do that they can still be here, they can observe, they can learn, they can take it in that way. So I'm honored to be with you today. Feel okay to shift to our genderbread person here?
No, I ain't done. Oh.
Okay, come on, Atina, bring it on.
No, because Jared really Jared sent me there. No, Jared sent me there. He really did, because I like what he said was so poignant, right? We're in these spaces where, and I was just arguing or making this point to one of my lecturers just today. Like, you live in a space where you have to be 2 times, 3 times as good, or just to get half of what other people are getting, right? You have to climb over these obstacles, right? Your life is the antithesis to the dominant kind of culture. So that disruption is seen every time, just in the form of, because Jared was talking about queer phenomenology, when you present your body without not even opening your mouth, that disruption is felt. That impression is made on the body of straight individuals. And their reaction to that, especially if they're dealing with some of the same feelings that you've dealt with, is a visceral one, because how dare you do this? And then when you're constantly being barraged by this kind of trauma and this kind of violence and this kind of the kind of hatred and reaction, you have to deal with that daily, right? While trying to maintain a sense of orientation within the surroundings. And that in and of itself is like, how do you expect me not to be angry? Because the society itself won't let me be me. That I'm always, watch this, that every single day it feels upon my skin, it feels through the stairs. You let me know that I'm not valuable enough for you to take to be in the same space as you. That when I shake your hand, you let me know through that one encounter that you don't rate me, that I'm not important enough. Because my body, the way that I'm using my body is not the standard, as Jared was saying, because I choose to use my body in a different way that is not in line with the capitalist, patriarchal, colonialist structure. You say to me then that you don't belong here. And I've said this to you in your presence, I've said, living in the Bahamas and not feeling like you're a part of that country, living within a space and you don't feel like you belong to any group, no matter how much they give you access to anything, is one of the most traumatic kinds of feelings. Because like when and I always say this, when I'm amongst the friends that I have now, like I'm grateful, but there's always this kind of, do I really belong here? Almost imposter syndrome always coming. Is there really space for me here? Or is this just all a sham? Are we bonding over our trauma here? Because the truth be told, like when Row Day comes, especially in these circles, or when there's a triggering of all the things that we don't really say out loud, all the intentions that we don't that we disguise and we don't share, because that's when everything goes to pieces, right? And then you're left with the bag again, trying to figure out how to navigate the world in a very authentic and honest way. And for years, so Jared talks about, like, for years trying to get to the point where I can say to myself that it's okay. For years trying to get to the point where I can say to myself, you are enough. For years. And then after reaching a point where you can say that and be visible, and then to have to relive that kind of feeling, but in a different way because of your visibility. And see, these are the parallels, these are the intersections of the traumatic experiences. Like how am I supposed to, and I was telling somebody today, I don't want to cope. I'm not interested in coping. I want to live. I want to be alive. I want to feel alive. So how is it that I can exist in a household and know, and my parents don't understand none of this, because it never impacted them, because their identities are in line with the common ones, and follow these lines and trends that have always been around. This is the kind of thing that we're talking about. And when Jared says it, the truth be told, while we can't discredit, and as Alexis was saying, we have to challenge them on it. And we can't force anybody. I understand that. But one of the things that I'm very, I feel passionate about is, I challenge you. If you're going to be my friend, I challenge you to be better. If you're going to be a partner, I challenge you to be better. Because even if this doesn't work out, I need you to be better for the next set of people you're going to encounter. We can't keep continuing to do these things, to treat people in these ways. We need each other to be better. And the truth of the matter is, we only have each other. We're not gonna get anything done unless we have each other. And so this is every day, I'm just going over this, what does this mean? What is today gonna look like? And granted that this week is actually one of the better weeks, because for 6 weeks that I've been in school, I felt this just this feeling of not wanting to do anything, not being productive, couldn't get anything really done. I didn't feel like myself. And so having to just hearing this, it's this insidious feeling all over again. When am I gonna have the space? When am I gonna feel okay and not threatened? When am I gonna not be able? When am I not gonna have to look over my shoulder? When am I gonna be able to go into come into a space and not feel like someone has devalued me? When can I have a conversation and shake your hand and feel like, you know what, this is a good space for me? And it's just all of that.
All of that. All of that. And all the energy and all the trauma, trying to just get basic human rights, right? To be safe in your body, to be okay in your body, to be who you are. I hope the call comes to the people, and the call to the allies and to the parents and the family members, because they will make those changes. We need a community around, right, the LGBT community that is shielding and absorbing and protecting and doing better, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, but if you know your parents are trying or your friends are trying, that in itself will feel different. But yeah, we could go on this for a long time. Does anyone else want to jump in? I feel like this is such a meaningful moment to acknowledge the trauma, the pain, the grief and loss that comes and comes and comes, right?
In the Caribbean, we don't acknowledge trauma.
I know.
And that's where I found liberation. Acknowledging my trauma. I'm like, girl, you suffering trauma. You suffer from trauma. You see everything through this lens because of the trauma that you've been through. You have to heal yourself from this trauma before you can help anybody else. And that's what I had to do. I had to sit my
Yes.
family down and I had to say, this is what it is. I cannot be an advocate and y'all don't understand the terminology. Y'all don't understand what I'm advocating for. Y'all don't understand. And that was a process.
Yes.
And it was not an easy process because in that process comes rejection. In that process comes these thoughts like you're not worthy. And coming from a religious background, family, it's even more mess. But
Right.
when you understand there's a difference between spirituality and religion, and you come into this oneness with yourself, and you begin to
Yes.
deal with your
Yes.
own traumas in life, then you would begin to say, okay, this is what I'm going to allow, and this is what I'm not going to allow in my own mental capacity, in my universe, in my own space. Now, when I go into somebody else's space, I'm very cognizant. And the reason why is because their energy, you can tell when you walk into the room, what's that energy going to be? So I've
That's
reached
right.
the point of controlling that energy, and not allowing their energy to affect me. But again, acknowledging trauma in our community is very important. And that's why
Very.
putting programs in place with doctors like Dr. E, who was on today, bridging that gap of mental health and mental wellness and well-being for our community is very important. And that's where we have to start building those bridges with our allies in this country.
Yes, yes, yes. And I just want to acknowledge there's the part of the labor, right? So the labor so you as the one who's been traumatized has to do the labor to educate the traumatizer, right? And it's labor and it's a choice in every day and every moment. Do I have the energy today to do the labor or do I need to disengage today? And it's, so I'm a trauma therapist. So I am here in part because of this. I know how this impacts people, right? And if we don't find ways to get through, and there is a spiritual part to this, I think that you have to come to terms, and I love what you said, not religion, but spirituality. So a connection to yourself, your body, your purpose, your higher power, or whatever you imagine that to be, or however you understand your connection to that purpose, because it's rough. It's rough down there. It's rough all over the world, but it's extra.
I was thinking about a little bit too, more like what Alexis and Tina saying. In terms of giving yourself, always have to giving yourself up and always have to like repeat yourself. It's almost like what's this term? Roxanne Gay said cannibalism or cannibalize yourself. You gotta continue
Yes.
to rip your story in order for people to or rip parts of yourself so people can understand who you are. And why should we have to give ourselves for everybody to eat up on our flesh? Why should we continue to give ourselves and pour out and pour out and pour out and pour out to the point where there is not even a toenail, not even a toenail? You're so unrecognizable. But then that's what like you said, that's what comes in terms of not even just I guess allies as well, but that support. If you don't have that support to hold your trauma, if you have somebody to call and say, listen, today I am having a rough day, you need somebody in your corner to say that. Like today, that person said something to me that trigger. I need you to hold me right now. And I think
Yes.
you need that person, that group, that friend. You need that person to help you to just and rest. Rest is also part of
Yes.
healing that trauma. Just say I need to step back from this. This is more than I can take on today. My mind is not there. My spirit is not there. It's all over the place. I'm gonna turn this laptop off. I have to take care of me. And so healing yourself, trauma and dealing with trauma is also knowing when to stop, knowing when to stop and pull back, and then know when to go forward. But also, again, trusting those people with that story, not to the point where you just dehumanize your own self in the process. Alexis, you look at yourself.
Yeah, so imagine being Black, a Bahamian, poor, trans woman, and in a relationship with, as a trans woman, with a person who has to listen to your trauma. When you're talking about your trauma and unpack your trauma, and then he has to deal with society's look on him being with a trans woman. So you're listening, like you mentioned, the listening air, like even the listening air has to go through some type of trauma. So like you said, always having to explain yourself or having to just now somebody sent me a thing with Rodney Munker, but he didn't know trans people were looking like normal people. That's
Oh, wow.
trauma for me. Like, what is normal people to you?
Right.
So you're dealing with all these forces, and like you said, sometimes you just got to cut off the laptop, cut off the computer, and listen and rest.
Yes, yes, yes.
On a ghetto, that's a ghetto, but like on a little, honestly, if you pay attention to Bahamian literature, the Bahamian commentary, you would jump over PI Bridge just to hear some of the comments, because it's just borderline trash. It's just borderline trash. It's just
You know, the sad part of it, some of the trash comes from our own community. And
absolutely.
that's what's so disturbing. The mental anguish. I believe we have LGBTI people working for these Speak Up Bahamas and these all these other things. Like, come on, there has to be some type, it has to click to you. Like, you can't do that to your brothers and your sisters. You can't do that for the likes. We have to be here for the change. And that's the messaging we now have to start telling our community. Because what's going to happen? It's going to continue manifesting into the other generation. You know what somebody told me the other day? I was having this conversation, and he said to me, he said, you know what? We learn these things from school. We learn these things from children. Because I say, why y'all just use this word? He said, I'm going to be very candid. He said the person was driving, and this person was like, get your sissy ass out of the way. That's what they said to the driver. Like, I'm saying, so why the person have to be a sissy? Why you couldn't say get your drunken or fornicating, or you understand why are
Yeah.
you? And you know what they said, and it clicked. These things they taught us. We hear our grandma saying those stuff. We hear, you understand what I'm saying? So these are things that was embedded inside of them from very young.
Yeah.
And anybody who comes around me, from my kids to anyone, I always tell them, even down to my nephew, I say, those words are violence. You cannot use those types of work. You cannot use that type of language. Like, you cannot just say out of your mouth, carry a sissy. That's culture in Bahamas. I say, but it's an act of violence, because why aren't you using another demographic or another group of people? Why are you choosing this particular group to say these types of stuff? So I think for me, knowing, and the people around me now, like you said, if they're taking the time to learn, I think Dr. Bettin said, like family, friends, or whatever, and acknowledging that there's a change, there's something going on, or acknowledging that, hey, I can't just say anything out of my mouth. This is my family member. If you see those people that are changing, you stick with them, and that's what's happening. There has been a shifting within the culture of the Bahamas, and I can equivocally say that that's a shifting for many LGBTI people. Some people have it difficult, some people have it rough, but I think, again, it's up to us, like Latino says, as a human being and as a person, what we're going to tolerate and what we're not going to tolerate. Because what you're going to allow will continue. And I think once our community starts to understand that, what we allow as a community will continue, and start stepping out of the box of the normal of, oh yeah, that's them, that, blah, blah. I think that's where our community will start to get better each day. I always say LGBTI for me stands for let's get better together.
Love it. Love it.
Bettin, I'm gonna say one more thing, and then I can let you because this is your Zoom. I don't want to take over.
No, this is important.
But because I think the reason why it's so charged, because again, I think we don't get to talk about trauma. We really don't. And when I think about trauma too, I think about, and we know this as a literary thing, but as a very material thing, there's this silence, and you don't want to say anything, and so for me, and I'm gonna talk about me because I don't want to talk about anybody else. So I'm gonna talk about me. Uh, I remember when I first got the word sissy, being called sissy, and we were playing basketball, a manly sport, and I think I fell down or something like that, and the guy was like, "Oh, why are you being a sissy?" And no, so then he policed my masculinity at a very young age, and so for me, that trauma just stuck with me. It's like, "Wait, I'm not gonna cry, or I'm not gonna, or so that's in a way I kind of hide myself. I hide a part of me of being emotional because I didn't want to see it as weak. And so for me, I carried that trauma in the way that I dress, in the way that I was presented around certain spaces. Like even when you get into barbershops, it's so charged in the barbershop to be this manly boy because they're talking about having sex with girls. You're not having sex with girls, so you can't engage in a conversation, but you still have to perform masculine. And so for me, that's traumatic. It's a traumatic thing going in that space. So I have to be silent, lest I be exposed myself as not being a part of that culture. And so, again, talking about this layer, I just think silence operates in the realm of trauma, but also in the space that you enter. And that can limit you or give you access to those spaces.
But I think it's a deafening silence.
Yes.
It's a deafening silence. Because there's nothing like being in a room where everybody thinks that nobody is LGBTQ, then their true intentions and the way that they really feel comes out. And you sit there and you just listen. And that deafening silence as you hear and your inner monologue goes, there's this palpitation of the heart. And you sit there and you can hear yourself clearly talk to yourself because it's only you. And you know that everybody else in the room, even if they feel what you feel, they're inside of themselves listening to feel, listening to hear, like to see if you're gonna respond. And you know you're not. You know you don't want to, because if you do, as Jared was saying, that is to put you at risk. And like that is honestly, that's what inspired me to write. I wrote, and I think me and Alexis, we were talking about this. I wrote because it was a matter of life and death. Because if I couldn't put those words on the paper, I would have done something else, and maybe done it in consuming alcohol, by doing risky sexual behavior, by doing because those are the outlets that are available within the Caribbean. So I wrote, I read books after books. I read as many books. I read James Baldwin till, and I'm still reading him. I like, to the point where I had to find people. Like I fell in love with James because of the kind of figure that he was. His oratory skills, the way that he was able to articulate both his sexuality and the issue of race that he was dealing with, to become that kind of figure. And like, so when I look, like I look at his life a lot, and then I look at other people's lives, because I'm like, I need to figure out how to survive and thrive. I want to thrive, but if I can't get to thriving, I need to figure out how to survive, because I don't want to die in this particular or in this kind of way. I know there's a way that I don't want to die. So when you talk, like, so when Jared says silence, the secrecy, and the shame is what I've been trying to write about for these past 4 or 5 years. And all of them culminating in this one insidious way that makes you feel like less than, makes you feel like you're not valued. no matter what you do. Because no matter how much cars you get, no matter what house you have, as long as you're within the space, even if you somehow are able to move beyond where people's expectations and get out of certain predicaments, they can always, even if not to your face, behind your back, reduce you to a sissy. And yes, I think the one of the most like crippling kind of feelings that there's nothing I could do with that. And I want to so bad, but I know that that's energy, like that's wasted energy trying to prove them wrong. But I also don't want to, because I don't want to feel like that because they're not giving me an opportunity to just exist. But here I am giving them the opportunity to be whoever they choose to be. And that's the unequal kind of playing field that you do, like you always come into contact with people. So whenever I come in contact with someone, I always have to deal with the fact that I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt to be whoever they want, even if they're lying to themselves and I know it. But they will not grant me that same courtesy. They won't. And they will not think for 1 second to expose that. They will not think to use that or weaponize that so that they can make themselves look bigger than they actually are. And that, see, those are the kind of social interactions at the very smallest level that you don't get over, because they occur every day. And so when people be like, oh, well, y'all keep talking about this. Yes, because every day I live it. We talk about it because I'm experiencing it every day. And some weeks you get the opportunity of, the only way that I don't experience it is if I stay away from people. And that, even in these exchanges, you have to go to work. You have to earn a living or try to earn a living. You know, there are certain things that you know that you don't want to do. There's a certain quality of life that you know you want to have. And in this space, there are certain impediments that are set up in such a way to ensure that you do not achieve that, because it's not in line with the goals and the way that society is going. And like this is what we keep talking about this. Like at what point do we allow ourselves, at what point can I say to myself, it's okay? Because to be honest with you, like just in a conversation, like I can go to flight or like that's, I can feel the anxiety raise up when I know somebody has said something homophobic. I can go to 0 to 100 quickly because I don't know the intention of that person.
Right.
I don't know if they're going to use something. I don't know if they have a weapon. I don't know. And so once I hear that language come out, I'm like, my antenna's up. Where's the nearest exit? Because in case something pop off, in case you freak out, I need to be ready. And that's the kind of vigilance, like this paranoid vigilance that LGBTQ people face within this particular space.
Yes. And I am just going to take a minute and flip over to my psychologist hat and trauma hat to talk about what's so important about what you just said and what you all are sharing here. And again, I don't come here as like an expert on any individual person in this space. I come with knowledge of people, and if it fits for you, take it. And if it doesn't, then throw it out. But we do know a lot about how the trauma impacts the body and the nervous system, and that living in that state of hyperautonomic arousal. So that fight, flight, that vigilance, it is not good for your body. That's what leads to all those secondary health conditions like diabetes and cancer and things like that. So when you're living in a world, this is the other part of trauma, when the trauma keeps happening, it's hard to recover, right? So it's one thing, someone's been through trauma, they come to therapy, but the trauma's over. Like they're safe now, they're away from the abuser. That trauma therapy looks different than people who are living in trauma. And in the States right now, the racial trauma, the systemized oppression and racism, so that racial trauma and people trying to, how do you heal when Black men are being, and Black people, Black bodies are being killed every other day, every other week. It feels like it's always, right? So I just want to name that it is difficult, but we know we have to, in trauma, get into our bodies and learn how to settle our bodies, even if it's for a moment. And that doesn't mean you ever can let go of that vigilance, except for maybe in your space, for these 5 minutes, I can be safe, and I need to try to get my nervous system to that calm, to be grounded and centered in your body. And I'm hearing so many things that you all are doing that make so much sense for healing. So I heard in your story, Natino, how essentially through literature, it's like, how do you find yourself in a world that doesn't see you and a world that reflects back hate and anger? So you had to go on a journey, and many people, anyone who's marginalized, has to find a way to make sense of who am I when the world tells me I'm like this and it doesn't fit for me? Or do we just internalize it? How do we fight that, right? It wears on our soul. And when it comes to trauma, some of the most important things in healing from trauma is a sense of power, control, choices, dealing with your body. So every time that you can have a choice, every time you acknowledge your choices and make them really intentional, that can increase your sense of empowerment and mastery. So finding things that bring those into your life to balance the experiences of being disempowered. And I don't want to make this simplified, but just I'm hearing important things. And I think sometimes it's important to put a name on what people do, because people are amazing. People, I believe that the human spirit wants to be whole and complete, right? There's a lot of misguided souls right now in this world. But if we can listen to our own wisdom, and connect with our body and our, whatever that kind of spiritual place for us is, that we find hope and keep moving. This conversation could go on for days, and maybe should be, I'm sure there'll be plans about having more regular kind of sessions or places, spaces to show up and be in this space and feel with each other and see each other. I'm open to staying in this space, and I'm open to moving through a little bit more material. So it's really up to the group that I can hear from right now.
You could go through the material, and if we need to, we'll stop. But
we'll come back in.
Yeah.
So I'll share for sure this image, and maybe one more thing, because I think the things I'm going to move through next validate everything that's been talked about, or validate portions of it. So I like this image. I'm super visual, but this is what happens in cultures where there is a man box and a woman box, right? And a man, so like, I had many discussions with people about how small the Bohemian man box, because it means you're male, you're tough, you don't have emotion. There's a way to be a man, and there aren't a lot of versions or variations. This talks about we're complex, complicated people. It also, so under that umbrella, when we had those letters like the LGBT, so you could take any one of those letters, and it's for people who aren't part of the community or don't know, they might think that a lesbian looks like this, like they're all a certain kind of a way, or a gay man is all a certain kind of way. But we want to say no, because it's complicated. So this little image, it points to the brain. So that's a beautiful rainbow brain at the top. And that's really about identity. And what this is trying to capture is the fact that we all have kind of a sense of ourselves. So it's like in our brain, but I'd even say as a psychologist, it's like a felt sense of who we are as far as our gender identity. So I have a general sense that I am a woman, right? I feel that's how my psychological sense of who I am as a person. So that's one aspect. And people can fall in all different ways about how they feel they are and think about themselves. The heart is talking about attraction. So that's really about who you are drawn to. That's really about sexuality, sexual orientation, whatever language you want to be. So who do you feel that attraction to? And then the little purple symbol, so again, having both male, female, and transgender or intersex. When we're talking about sex, we're really talking about anatomical sex. And that's about your primary and secondary sex characteristics. So that's both your genitalia, but also secondary things like how deep your voice is, how much facial hair, how broad your shoulders, things like that can all be into what is your physical sex, anatomical sex. And then this whole dotted line over here, expression is how you express yourself. So that's really your gender expression. So I could even, and what this is, I'm gonna move it up just a little bit. Oops, make sure I can, sorry, I need to move the pictures here. So I wanna get down to these, I'm gonna make it a little smaller because there's 2 rows. I hope you guys can see that. I know it's really small, but we'll do the best with it. And you'll get copies of this because Natina will send this out. Actually, I'm going to do it like this. I'll make it one bigger and then just move it up a little bit. It's easy to say, okay, so maybe my vision is that lesbians, so someone who gender identity, maybe a lesbian, I think people get confused. So what? Do they identify gender identity wise as a woman, as a man? How do they dress? And then what if some lesbians are really butch? What if some lesbians are really femme? Like, does that throw people off? When you have those boxes, you expect things to line up, right? Someone who is gender identity as a woman, they're supposed to express as feminine, they're supposed to have matching sex characteristics as a female. And then of course, in heteronormative societies, you're supposed to be both sexually and romantically attracted to a man. That's how it's supposed to line up, right? It's all prescribed. But what this diagram says is we each should do this for ourselves to really make a consideration of how do I think and feel about myself? Where do I land? And when Safe Zone training started, so for example, each one of these, there used to be a one, like a one arrow, right? So it was woman was one way and man was the same, but they've separated that out to say, no, it's not like you're only so much man or so much woman as far as your gender identity. You can say, I feel very like womanness. It's throwing me off with the womanness. I feel like a woman and yet I feel like a man in some ways. So some people may have that kind of a presentation, or even for me. So I feel like a woman, but I was a tomboy growing up, they used to call me. So there's a little bit like I have tools. So there's a little bit of some like man-like characteristics, and that's okay. And the world I live in allows me to have a little flexibility around that. Same with gender expression. So some people may express like femininely sometimes. They may express more masculinely. They may express somewhere in between. So we can decide and kind of land ourselves on these different, they're not exactly spectrums, but arenas. And this can evolve over time. Anatomical sex. So this is one that unless we do transition through hormones or surgery, your anatomical sex won't change. So that's something that is generally static unless there's some changes made to that. But again, we don't want to assume it isn't like there are woman bodies or female bodies and male bodies. There are a variety of bodies. And then at birth, we get assigned. And that is just based at the doctor's look, and whatever it looks the most like, they're going to assign that sex at birth. And then I like that they're separating out. I think this confuses people, that you can be sexually attracted to women, feminine, female people, or men, masculine, male people, while you may or may not be romantically attracted to those same people, right? It could be that there is a difference there. So the point is that we are these amazingly complex human beings, right? And we talked about intersectionality. So we can put all of this on top of then race and nation of origin and age and generation and all of that. So we're complicated. And I know I'm speaking as a psychologist. The more we understand ourselves and allow ourselves to be true to who we are, the healthier, and I'm talking overall wellness and mental health and physical health, the healthier we are. And the more we can allow people to do that, the healthier that they are. So again, right here, this gray is hard to read. We tend to confuse these, but these are all separate things. And I feel like I'm preaching a little bit to the choir, so I want to open up if anyone wants to comment on this diagram and this concept. Any questions?
The diagram is universal. When they came up with it, it's a great learning tool. It's easy to understand. I mean, starts from the brain, works its way down to the heart, and down to the sexual organs or expression of however erotic love. So understanding a human being, the way the human, just how you can pick up a biology book and learn biology, why can't we pick this up and learn it as a society? 1 plus 1 is 2. Some people say 1 plus 1 ain't 2, but we're still learning something. So it's up to us to want to learn. It's up to our community to want to learn. It's up to our decision makers to want to learn. It's up to our policy makers to want to learn the different
Right.
types of persons in the Bahamian society.
Right.
And the
Right.
excuse is always this 1% or this 2%. But we have a growing society of young people, generations doing the work for generations to come. So we won't have the things that we're going through in society now of forced migration of LGBTI persons, LGBTI citizens of the Bahamas, forced migration to other countries because the quality of life for them or their existence in their own country is they're not acknowledged in their own country. So this is why it is imperative and it's important for us to continue these dialogues and conversations with the decision makers and the gatekeepers and the policymakers of our country to realize that there is a group of marginalized citizens that has been left behind for years. And the
Yes.
tools are out there, the knowledge is out there,
Yes.
but the political will or the decision-making will has to be there. And then we
Yes.
can become an inclusive society.
Yes. 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 All of that. All of that. And it reminds me, so I think of two things. It's about culture. And so this is in our culture and in the culture of the community, of the town, of each island has a variation of this. But culture change takes 7 to 10 years, right? So it is a process. It's not like an overnight. So it takes some time to transform and transition, and it takes a lot of work. So the more people we can bring into the crowd, right, into the group that is thinking and fighting about this, the better. And then I think about, unless this, so this is something my partner says, whenever a country dismisses a portion of its population, it is dismissing a portion of its human capital. And what I'm thinking of is about all the brilliant and talented LGBTQIA folks who have left for exactly those reasons. So when the Bahamas understand, so if you dismiss all the women, and some countries do that, you're dismissing some of the most talented, brilliant people. So if it ever comes down to like economy, right? And recognizing, wait a minute, why are we missing all these folks? Why are folks not coming back when they go abroad? So I hope the transition will continue. And I think when we can connect to history, right? So people don't know the history of the cultures, all the native and African cultures and many cultures around the world had a different relationship. And if we can, this is part of the decolonization, right? If we can decolonize ourselves and get back to the real history and understand the beauty and the power and the position of intersex folks, of transgender folks, of like all the folks under the queer umbrella, right, through history. So anyways, back on the soapbox. Anyone else want to jump in? Okay, I'm going to move down to, because this came up, and this is, sorry for scrolling so much. This is getting back to the part of this, the queer community is a marginalized community. As such, there are things that people, that there are privileges that this community does not have access to. And this is a list of privileges. So usually we break out, and I know we're kind of running short on time, so I'm going to share this with you, just let you glance over this. So usually we do this in small groups where we have folks, and often this presentation is done to mixed groups. So there are some allies, some straight folks, some ignorant folks, sorry, naive folks, I don't know how you want to say that, but all at different kind of areas of their understanding and commitment to social justice in this area. This is an area where we shed some light and say, there are things that you get to do as a straight person that you take for granted. And I think someone mentioned this earlier, like things like being able to go to the hospital to see your partner when they're very ill, being able to adopt children, There are so many things here. And again, to me, this stuff is like basic human rights. Like if we could all get to a world where we can do these things. So I'll just put that up there and see if there's anything we want to tackle or comment on. It was also brought up about being able to be in public and be affectionate with your partner. Down just a little bit more.
With this, a lot of people will be rich, $100 each question.
Yes.
See, that, again, I see it. I see it. I get it.
It's so imbalanced, right? When you look at these basic things and things that, you know, most heterosexual people, I take this for granted. They don't think about this. And I have actually, this has been a turning point. You know, I've had some people who really made a transition in the training about their own beliefs, who had religious beliefs that said that this was wrong, right? That being queer was wrong, being LGBTQ was wrong. And they got to the part of seeing your partner in the hospital and being able to, like, if your partner dies and not being able to adopt the child, like going, oh my gosh, like that. I think, right, we're all coming from a different perspective, but when we get that, it affects people on those basic rights. We hope that we continue to change minds, change hearts, open doors. Any other comments on this? I would say, so again, I think that for many people in this Zoom space or watching this, may have some knowledge about this, but let's just kind of run over this real quickly. Again, this is something to share to other people. So you can pass on this information, pass on the information to family and friends. So coming out, or sometimes the term is coming out of the closet, is a process by which, and many people have heard this term, if you haven't, it's really about when a person accepts and identifies with their gender identity and or their sexual orientation, and they start sharing that with others, and they willingly choose to do that. So that is how it is supposed to be, right? So that a person makes that choice to share this part of their identity with someone. So sometimes we talk about coming out as if it were a one-time thing. I think this is a really important point, so I'm just gonna make that a little bigger. And I think about this in the Bahamas. For many folks, it's a series of decisions. So it may be a decision about, I'm telling these family members, or I'm telling these friends, or at work, I'm in or out. But in the Bahamas, I think it's every day and almost every interaction for some folks. Like it is a process. And for anyone who really has not come out in a more broad or universal ways, it's a decision every single relationship and every moment. So I love that they bring this up. So most people don't have the experience of Ellen. So everyone knows who Ellen is, right? Ellen DeGeneres, who, came out and the whole world knows. So kind of like it was a decision and then it was done. And of course, Ellen was in an environment and a context that was accepting and in general and open to that. So was able to do that and had some power and privilege, that supported her ability to do that. And again, important to know that people can be out in some spaces and in other spaces. And that could be families, it could be friends, it could be classmates, maybe they're in the religious community, but out with friends. But that decision is about safety, comfort, trust, and readiness. So when someone comes out to you, this is a big deal. This, take this, I feel like it's a sacred thing, right? To be like, this is a gift. Someone really is having comfort and trust in me. Little red, yellow, or sorry, I don't even know my colors today. Orange box. This is very important. It's dangerous, unhealthy, unhelpful to force someone out. So we never, ever, ever. It is not our decision to make. It is not our information to share. So we do not, particularly in places where there is an actual threat of violence and repercussions or repercussions. Don't call someone out. That is their decision. So even if you feel like you're being helpful and supportive and wanting them to be free, whatever, many of us know the difference between intent and impact. This is one of those things, the intention really doesn't matter. And it's just not your choice. We'll go down to this bottom here. So if someone comes out to you, these are things that are not helpful. In general, don't say I always knew. Don't downplay it because it's a big deal. For most people, this is a big deal. Don't go tell people. Don't talk about your new gay friend, your new trans friend. You know, it's not your thing to carry. It's not your for your glory. This is super important. I feel like don't forget that they're still the person you knew and befriended and loved before. And like we talked before about all those aspects of identity. So they may still be the person you played basketball with. They may be the person who you watched movies with, or you could have do all different things, but this is the same person. This is one aspect of their personality. Don't ask probing questions. Don't cross personal barriers. Especially ones you wouldn't have crossed before. And I've heard this many, many times where people, they want to ask detailed question about sex and body parts and what, like, that's not the time for that when someone's coming out. And depending on the relationship, that may or may not be a discussion for later. Don't assume that you know why. In fact, you can ask. So in the do's, again, know this is a sign of huge trust. This is a big deal. This means that this person values you. You do want to check in how confidential, like asking things like, who knows, you know, in what kind of areas are you out? Is it a secret? And then follow that, whatever those rules are, that's what you're going to go with. Remember again that their gender and sexuality is just one dimension of many, many, many. Show interest and curiosity about this part and ask them how you can be of best support. What can you do? Are there things that would be helpful? Are there things they need? I think a really good friend and ally would acknowledge, like, I'm sure this is difficult. I'm sure you face a lot of stress or trauma around this. Are there ways that I can be supportive? So thoughts, feelings, reactions to this part.
My thoughts, my reaction as it relates to trans and intersex people, outing them is very dangerous, especially when it comes, and it hurts when it comes from your own community members.
Yes.
You would see like your own community members, oh, you know, and like you hear it. They don't know that you hear it, but the universe lets you hear it. Their actions and their body language, the minute you walk past or you walk and you know what they do. You know, you go in a public space, in a public place, they out you. You understand? And it's very dangerous and it's very callous.
Very.
You don't know who, everybody can't handle information. And I think for our community, I think understanding the importance of outing someone is dangerous. For example, they mix the down low culture with outing, which that's a whole different gamut when it comes to outing an individual who's already out. You understand? There's nothing more you can do to a person that's visible. And by you being an ally of that visible person, it's not your duty to out them. It's not you shouldn't do that. And I like how you have it. Knowing this is a sign of huge trust. For example, oh, I always had a feeling, I always knew. You never say those things. Those are like, what did you know? Like, tell me, what did you know? You know? So I think this training itself has to go in our community, even to the persons who are a part of this community, known as the LGBTI community of the Bahamas.
Yes, yes. Thank you for all of that.
So I think as we continue, what we should probably look at is having this training in a more condensed version and on a more regular basis so that we can touch more persons.
Sounds good. I mean, these materials are online and they are free. So there's the facilitator packet, there's a participant packet, there's some guidelines. So we modified largely today because we're both over internet. They recommend 3 hours, but you could distill it down to key activities, key points. I think it's a great idea. It's a great like basic language, shared language, and some good do's and don'ts for people who don't really even know those basics. And quite frankly, as a reminder for even if people do know that, right? So I'm sure a lot of people in this space today are like, yeah, I know that, but it's a good reminder. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen unless there's something someone really wants, and we can just open up. So the last part, they have we would do like an anonymous Q&A where people could write down any questions they really want to ask. I think we can people could drop any questions into the chat if they want to. Changing my screen view. Oh, wow, there's a whole
I'd
bunch
like
of
to
chats
make a
in there.
comment. In the Bahamas' context, someone who is actually seeking maybe to talk about coming out or to go to a professional like yourself. Like when you go to a professional over here, you met with religious conversion therapy. That is the first thing we're met. Oh, you need to get saved. You need to go to church. You need Jesus. You need the washing of the blood. So
Yes.
that's another layer of trauma. You understand? That's another
Yes.
layer of religious violence. That's another layer of trauma that this community has to go through. So we don't have the spaces or we don't have the resources. Thank God for someone we know like Dr. E. But then you have some persons who claim that they're allies of the community, but their messaging is still violence towards the community. And it's another layer of trauma that the community faces. Yes, you're a doctor, you're a psychologist, you're this, but yet you come with your own biases towards your client.
Right.
You can't do that. I mean, you have the right to do that, but we have to call you out as a community when I see you posting stuff that is violence against LGBTI communities, not even just migrant communities, the disabled community, PHLIV communities. When I see you posting stuff on social media or wherever you post these things, mostly on social media, about these communities, we have to start to call these people out. And I think what it is we've been in the shadows for too long, just letting them get away with anything they want to say, anything they want to just sell them out against these communities. This is an intersectional work. It's just not LGBTI. Right. Any marginalized community, and that's why collaboration is important. Do you know how much violence and rhetoric is towards migrants, Haitian communities? Do you understand the stigma that is related to people who are of Haitian descent or who were born in the Bahamas, but because their mother is a Haitian or their father is a Haitian, they're ridiculed? That's trauma. And we're not going to talk about these things because we only see trauma as something physical or something happened, the hurricane, which is trauma. But we're not going to downplay those traumas. But there are some actual traumas that we're living every day. And when we look for help for this, it's not just going on a plane to Miami and thinking it's okay. No, we need spaces. And we need to find these allies who can sit and listen to the traumas that our community and our marginalized community. A mother of 6 don't know where the laptop is coming from for their child's education in this virtual world. On top of that, being a woman, a Black woman, underpaid, no rights. Women's rights in the Bahamas is laughed upon. And we're not taking these things and the trauma that our Bahamian citizens are going through and have been going through for years. We have to acknowledge it. And we have to try to find the best allies that can help us with our situation.
Yes, yes. And lean into each other, right? So, sometimes it's helpful to have professionals. Sometimes it's helpful to have healing spaces, right? With peers. And it's a both and. And I just want to say for the record, I was at the Caribbean, it's CRCP, the Caribbean Regional Psychology Conference. And I met someone from the APA, which is the American Psychological Association. And I had a conversation. I said, oh, well, I'm now in the Bahamas and I'm licensed here and I'm practicing. Well, you don't have any jurisdiction over my practice. And he said, well, unless you were down here doing conversion therapy, and then we would revoke your membership. So there are organizations that actually in the world that say, no, you cannot do that kind of harm and violence on people. So it is finding within the Bahamas, and it makes me very sad not to be there, you know, because I think we could have grown a community of mental health professionals that we know are people that are safe, right? And are at least trying to do better every day, if not doing better every day, right? So I'm noticing this 2 hours went so fast, you all. I am so happy that this Pride Bahamas has launched. I heard about it a couple years ago as an idea, and it's real, it's happening. You all can be so happy and proud of this accomplishment. Thank you. I don't know who's all part of the arrangement. I know Natina and Ide are both very involved. Thank you both and everyone else involved in this. And I'm happy to stay in conversations and moving forward. So hopefully I'll be invited back to see you all in the future.
Definitely, definitely. I don't know if anybody has a question. I know we're almost out of time, but if we could entertain a question, if
Sure.
someone has one. Does anybody have a question?
I know I've been silent through most of the time, but I actually just have, I guess, more of a comment and a statement of, I suppose, support and suggestion. There was a lot of talk today about allies. As an ally and a passionate and long-time ally of this community, I first want to say great job to you guys for putting on this particular event. Thank you, Dr. Bettin, for all of the information that you provided today. And also, really thanks to the team for creating the series of spaces you created yesterday and today. I wanted to say, allyship came up so much today, and it resonated particularly with me because I do feel as if that is a space that needs to be cultivated so much in the Bahamas. I feel as if, there are a lot of us, 30% of us that got into college went off to school, and most of us are going to places that are quite liberal. We're in spaces and when we come back, we're coming back with new attitudes and new ideas that do make us much more receptive to the human rights reality of accepting this community, and I feel as if that is a community that we can capitalize on, but I know how difficult it is, and I know that we need so much more support. And I feel as if allyship is something that in the Bahamas we're weak with. Like Alexis had said, we don't really work in intersectionalities very well. This community should have inherent allies, and I am an activist in some of those other spaces, and I'm always saddened and quite frankly enraged sometimes at the dearth of rhetoric, the dearth of language, the dearth of even just concept and intent in protecting this particular community. I work in anti-sexual violence as a volunteer, and some of the things that some of my fellow volunteers say about the queer community is incredibly disheartening, even though there are also volunteers who are also very encouraging as well. So I want to encourage, I think Tino, you had mentioned creating more spaces like this and making some very pointed efforts to try and reach out to allies, to foster allyship and educate allies, because I think that is very much needed. I think that there are people who are potentially holding liberal, progressive ideas for perfectly accepting, or what they feel is accepting of the community, but simply don't even know what it means to be an ally. They don't even think that they're being an ally, but they are, I want to say, woefully ignorant. And I mean ignorant not in the negative sense, but ignorant like as in they truly just don't have the knowledge and the training on how they could be doing this better, more effectively, how they could be making their presence I want to say portable safe space, just by creating safe spaces around them by virtue of their presence, using their privilege to create a bulwark for these kinds of communities, etc. And I mean, and then that's no knock. I'm pretty sure that I know, because I learned things today, that I could be improving on how I do that as well. So all of that to say, very long-winded to say, once again, congrats on how well this went, and let's I'm here with you as an ally. I'll put that statement of support strongly, and happy to assist in helping us grow grow having more of these spaces, I suppose, because I think that they're very much needed. And I think that it's very much overdue that the Bahamas started making some strides in this area.
Thank you. Yes, 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 yes. So I just want to name this really quickly. In the United States right now, because of the racial trauma and violence, white people are being I was going to say called out, but they're both being called out, but they're also being called in, like to recognize that white supremacy is the problem that needs to be fixed. So white people need to get active in being anti-racist, right? It is largely white people's job to fix racism, right? Because it's a white supremacy problem. So it's a similar thing of we need to call our allies. We need, and allies, however they identify, but they need to be a part of this fight too. So thank you for saying that.
Yes, definitely. I think you know what, Dr. Bettin, this is another reason why I really love you. I think that even when we had those discussions around race, right, you were never afraid to acknowledge your privilege, and you were definitely comfortable enough to go to those uncomfortable conversations. So I want to thank you. We're definitely going to stay in touch, and we need you to come back because your expertise is invaluable. But right now, we've come to the end of this session. And we're gonna move over to our next link, which is we're showing a movie, and we're gonna be showing Moonlight for those of you who will go who have the links, and it's gonna be an awesome time. And then we'll have a quick discussion, and then we'll end for the evening. But thank you again, Dr. Bettin.
Thank you all.
And
Thank you all.
and it everything, just the way that you provide space. This is what you do, and so. We're grateful, and we needed to have these conversations. And thank you again, Shantez, for your support, because it means a lot. I've actually sat in a bit of the ORG meetings and watched you. So I know that you're very passionate in what you do. So thank you again for that. But we're going to end the session right here, and then we're going to go over to our next session. If you want to join, that one will be posted on Facebook, but you can then join if you already have all of the links. Thanks again, and good evening, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
All right, bye.